Dear learners, we welcome you in this session. The title for this session is Humanistic Perspective in Learning. Let us see what all points will be covered in this session. First of all, we'll discuss the meaning and principles involved in the humanistic perspective in learning. Then we will be discussing the role of two theorists, Abraham Maslow and Carl Rogers. So we'll discuss the Maslow's views on learning and what are its instructional implications. Then Carl Rogers' humanistic perspective in learning and its instructional implications. Let us first discuss meaning of humanistic perspective in learning. Now, before coming to this slide, I would like to give you some background about humanistic perspective, how it originated, in which decade and in which year it made its appearance. Now, if I talk about the first half of the 20th century, then at that time there were only two forces which were dominant. Now, the first force was behaviorism, and you all understand what behaviorism is. And the second force was psychoanalysis. As we talk about behaviorism, we understand that behaviorism talks about two important concepts, that is the concept of punishers and the concept of reinforcers. That means the response of the individual in response to the stimulus. That means if there is any change in the environment, then we show a response. So learning and motivation, they both were explained in terms of this change in the environment. Now, the second dominant force in the first half of the 20th century, as I mentioned just now, it was psychoanalysis, mainly influenced by the Freud. And as we talk about psychoanalysis, we know that the emphasis is on the unconscious drives and the internal instincts. That means we are driven by the instincts and the drives. So, the humanistic perspective thinking, this is against these two dominant forces, that is behaviorism as well as psychoanalysis. Here, we are shifting from the drives or instincts or response to environment to the whole individual, to the total person. And we talk about physical, emotional, interpersonal, and intellectual elements. Not only these elements, but the interaction between these elements. So now you understand that this third force became very important, very influential after behaviorism and psychoanalysis in the first half of the 20th century. Now, after giving you some background about the genesis of humanistic perspective, let us now discuss the humanistic perspective, what it talks about. Humanistic perspective aims to restore some balance in psychology by looking at human needs and human experience with very less theory. As I have already mentioned that in this session we will be discussing the role of two theorists, Abraham Maslow and Carl Rogers. Now, this theory, that is humanistic perspective, in education, this takes root in humanistic psychology, with the key concepts focusing on the idea that all children are inherently good. And the education should focus on rational ways to teach the whole child. According to this theory, student is the authority on how they learn. That means we're talking about the child-centered education. The content which they want to learn, the learning experiences to be designed for them, and even the assessment. All these are to be, designed keeping in mind the needs and the interests of the child. And all of their needs should be met in order for them to learn well. Now, here I would like to give you an example. For example, if a child is hungry and this hungry child is coming to the classroom, do you think that the hungry child will be motivated to learn? Can we motivate this child to learn? No. So first of all, this biological need, that means he needs food, and this is a biological need. So this must be fulfilled. And you must have heard about the midday meal schemes. So midday meal schemes in schools are designed so that no child remains hungry, and once this biological need is fulfilled, then they can be motivated to learn. Humanistic theory engages social skills, feelings, intellect, artistic skills, and practical skills. So the emphasis is not only on the content. We find that feelings, the cognitive skills, as well as affective skills, practical skills, all are to be engaged. Self-esteem, goals, and full autonomy are key learning elements in the humanistic learning theory. Because you know what? Self-esteem, I must, appreciate myself. I must be an achiever, and my achievements must not only be recognized by myself but by others also. I need appreciation from others. Then humans are driven by feelings, and this causes educators who understand humanistic psychology to focus on the underlying human emotional issues. Now again, I take an example here. Suppose in a class, a child doesn't behave properly, shows a bad behavior. Now, instead of punishing the bad behavior of the child, as an educator, it becomes my responsibility to find out that if the child has some emotional issues, and because of those emotional issues, he is behaving badly. So, we need to understand this important point. Teachers must create a classroom environment where students feel comfortable and safe. As I discussed with you in the previous slide, that food is a biological need, and this need to be fulfilled before motivating the child to learn. So similarly, a child requires a very conducive, safe, secured environment, and only then we can motivate the child to learn. So environment plays a very important role. Now, after discussing the meaning of humanistic perspective in learners, let us move to the important principles involved in the humanistic learning theory. So we'll discuss some principles. First of all, the student choice. The choice of the student is very, very important. And here we are talking about student-centered learning. They must be given options to choose from. It could be the content, it could be the learning activities, and also the assessment. So as far as the choices are concerned, the options are given to the learners to choose from. And this teachers need to understand this, that the options must be given to the learners. Fostering engagement to inspire students to become self-motivated to learn. Now, the entire focus is on engagement. So, teachers, they need to provide motivation and exciting activities to help students feel engaged about learning. Means the activities must be designed keeping in mind the needs and the interests of the students, and they must be engaged. They must, it should not be a routine affair. The students must feel excited. They must have, interest in those learning activities. This kind of engagement is required. Importance of self-evaluation. Now, what happens in a routine classroom? The teaching is done keeping in mind the grades, and students also learn focusing on grades, and routine tests, they become a very casual or very normal affair in the classroom. The routine tests are taken very frequently. But when we are talking about the humanistic perspective in learning, grades, they do not matter, because grading students, this encourages them to work for the grade. So instead of doing things for their own satisfaction and excitement of learning. So what are we focusing here? We are focusing here on the self-evaluation. Students must be encouraged to evaluate themselves, and they can keep a track of their own learning. So here the emphasis is on self-evaluation rather than grading by the teachers. Now we are moving to another important principle. Feelings and knowledge both are important. What does it mean? See, when I am talking about feelings, I am referring to the affective domain, affective skills. And when I talk about knowledge, I am talking about the cognitive skills or cognitive domain. So, as educators, as teachers, whenever we are designing lessons and activities, we have to keep in mind the feeling and the knowledge parts both. So, it's not that I am designing activities only keeping in mind the knowledge. The feeling parts are then ignored. No. Both of them are to be kept in mind while designing activities for the learners. As I mentioned earlier also, the importance of the safe learning environment is highly emphasized in humanistic perspective. So here, the humanistic learning, it focuses on the entire student. Humanistic educators understand that they need to create a safe environment so students can have as many as their needs met as possible. They need to feel safe physically, mentally, and emotionally in order to be able to focus on learning. So, fulfilling their needs and creating a safe, non-threatening, comfortable environment for the learners, this is what is required. Now, after discussing meaning and important principles of humanistic perspective, learners, let us now move to the Abraham Maslow's views on learning. In 1954, Maslow proposed a theory of human needs, and the purpose was that the priorities of the people, they were put in an order. Certain priorities, they were put at the bottom, and then to next level, reaching the top. Now, Maslow has given two types of needs. First needs are deficiency needs or D needs, and second type of needs are being needs or B needs. Now, how are they different? Now, deficiency needs are for food, rest, safety, etc. And these are very basic needs. These are for survival. Then we move to the being needs. Being needs are for achieving self-actualization, for achieving your all abilities, for becoming what you are actually capable of. Now, according to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we cannot achieve B needs if D needs are not fulfilled. So first of all, we have to achieve the D needs, and then you can move to the B needs, that is self-actualization. Now Maslow has further broken down the D and the B needs, and we can see all those needs in the next slide in figure 1. Now when we look at this figure 1, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, at the bottom we can find the physiological needs. Now learners, what are physiological needs? As I mentioned earlier, the physiological needs are the biological needs. And what are the biological needs? Food, water, air, warmth, shelter, clothes, and also sleep. So these are our biological needs, and without these physiological or biological needs, the human survival is not possible. So once our physiological needs are met, then we think of safety. We need a secure environment. We need a safe environment. We need an order. We need an arrangement. We need a stability. So next is the safety needs. Once my safety needs are fulfilled, then my social needs become important. Now, what are social needs? It's a need to belong to a group, need to have friends, need to have people around me, need to have a social circle. That means intimacy, trust, and giving and receiving love and affection. This is what is included in social needs. So once my social needs are fulfilled, I move to the next level where I have esteem needs. Esteem needs, as I mentioned earlier also, I can keep them into two categories. First is the self-esteem, and then the esteem or appreciation from others. When I say self-esteem, it means that I must be an achiever. The competency, I feel confident. I feel proud of myself because of my achievements. So all this comes in the self-esteem. Then I also require recognition and appreciation from others. Once the esteem needs are fulfilled, I move to the next level, that is intellectual needs. Intellectual needs or cognitive needs. See, all human beings, they have a desire to increase their intelligence. Why? Because then they want to chase more and more knowledge. We all want to, explore, discover, create knowledge in order to understand the world around us. Once the intellectual needs, and if intellectual needs are not satisfied, then it has been seen that we tend to remain, in a confusion state, and it also leads to the identity crisis. Once intellectual needs are satisfied, we move to the aesthetic needs. Aesthetic needs is a higher order, need where you look for beauty in nature and you want to connect with nature and you want to have, beautiful connection with nature and your environment. So it's a need for beauty. So after satisfying the aesthetic needs, we move to the topmost level, that is self-actualization. One thing which I would like to, emphasize here is this, that all of us are not able to achieve this self-actualization level. Only few fortunate ones are able to achieve self-actualization. And as I mentioned earlier also, self-actualization means achieving what I am capable of, achieving all my abilities. It could be in the field of the music, it could be in the field of the writing, it could be in the field of the sports. And many people, they talk about their spiritual experiences. So actually being satisfied, reaching a stage where you have achieved what you are capable of, realizing all your abilities, means this is self-actualization level. So I have already mentioned that first is a physiological need, which is important. Then we move to the safety, and we need a safe and secure environment. And after safety, next comes the social needs, belonging to a group. And once social needs are satisfied, then next is the esteem needs, that is recognition by others as well as I am proud of myself. And then comes after esteem needs comes the intellectual and the aesthetic needs. And then ultimately we reach the topmost level, that is self-actualization. Now here I would like to talk about some peak experiences also, because towards the end of his life, Maslow's interest shifted towards peak experiences. Now, he saw such experiences as moments when the world appears complete and we feel at one with it. And these peak experiences, they are associated with self-actualization. And the fortunate few people that self-actualize are more likely than others to have peak experiences. As I mentioned that I can realize my potential in any field. It could be music, art, or sports. And for some people, peak experiences are spiritual in nature and associated with religious experience. Now, here I would like to give you some examples. Suppose I'm watching a movie, or if I'm reading a book, and I find there is something, after reading that, or after listening to music, or after watching a movie, something, strikes, some emotional things, some emotional chord, strikes with my internal thing. I feel that, yes, this is true, and I feel a complete bliss, a state of happiness. So this is what is peak experience, when some emotional chord strikes with you, or you feel utter happiness, or you feel utter completeness. So this is the state of the peak experiences. Now, after discussing the Maslow's views, let us see how these views they find a place in the classroom, or how these views they have any instructional implications. Now, first of all, I discussed with you that the needs are important, and if the needs are met, only then the student feels motivated to learn. So when all levels of Maslow's hierarchy of needs are met, students show their full ability and eagerness for learning. Higher up in the hierarchy a student is, the better the motivation, and therefore the student will experience more effective learning. This I would like to explain with an example. As you all know that the first level is the physiological needs, second is safety, third is social. So now if I take a student who is at the third level, who's trying to fulfill the social needs, and there is another student who is at the first level, that is trying to fulfill biological or physiological needs. Now my question is this, that which student, whether at level 3 or at level 1, which student will be more motivated to learn? So we all can understand that obviously at level 3 his needs are physiological safety needs are met, and now he's trying to belong to a group. So student at level 3 will be more motivated to learn than the student at level 1. Then Maslow's hierarchy provides a model for how students are motivated to learn. Without the lowest layer of the hierarchy met, students cannot reach the next level. This we have seen it in the hierarchy, in the triangle, that if physiological needs are not met, you cannot move to the next level, that is safety. If your safety needs are not met, you cannot move to the third level, that is social needs. If your social needs are not met, you cannot move to the esteem level. So this is very, very important that each student can move up in the hierarchy with the proper support of the teachers and the school staff. So after discussing the Maslow's theory as well as its instructional implications, let us move to the Carl Rogers humanistic perspective in learning. Now, according to Carl Rogers, all students, they have a desire to learn. You must have seen children asking so many questions. Why is it so? How this happens? Why is it green in color? How the clothes, they dry up. So there are so many questions because they have a desire to learn. And this eagerness to learn is a basic assumption in humanistic education. And therefore, children should be given as many opportunities as possible to satisfy their curiosity. So if they ask questions, instead of punishing them, instead of scolding children, you must provide them maybe some reading material, maybe some hands-on activity, maybe children, they learn technology so fast, maybe certain websites, maybe some digital resources, so that they can go through it and they can satisfy their curiosity. Another important thing is this, that learning should be meaningful to students. According to Rogers, significant or meaningful learning takes place when students they perceive it as relevant to their own needs and purposes. If a student feels that he wants to learn this particular topic, or if he feels that he can gain something, or if he is interested because he finds it meaningful, then only the children will make an effort to learn. So this is very important. You must have seen that children, they learn computer or mobile very fast. Why? Because if they have to play a game, they have to learn to operate a computer or a mobile. So they find it significant, and therefore learning takes place very fast. Learning without threat. Learning is best acquired and retained in an environment free from threat, and the process of learning is enhanced when students can test their abilities, try new experiences, and first, another very important point, that they should not have this fear of committing mistake, that if I commit a mistake, I will either be punished or some negative remark will be passed. So there should not be such such things in the classroom, and they should be allowed to learn without any such fear. Then self-initiated learning. According to Rogers, learning is more significant and lasting when it is self-initiated by the learner. And another important point, that both feelings and the mind of the learner are involved. When children learn on their own, then they can make judgments, choices, and evaluations. Cognitive as well as affective aspects. This point I have already discussed earlier, that learning should involve aspects of the person that is cognitive as well as affective, and such a student will feel more personally involved in learning, more eager, more excited about accomplishments, and more motivated to continue learning. Now let us move to the instructional implications of Carl Rogers' perspective in learning. How can these points be, applied in a classroom situation? According to Carl Rogers, experiential learning is equivalent to personal change and growth. So the emphasis is on providing experiences rather than reading the content or lecture method. Here the emphasis is on the experiential learning, because this is equivalent to the personal change and growth. Rogers feels that all human beings have a natural desire to learn. So when I already have a desire to learn, then what should be the role of a teacher? The role of the teacher is as a facilitator. The environment, the classroom climate should be positive. What can be done for creating a positive climate? This means that they should be guided. They must be, given the resources whenever they ask questions. They should not be ridiculed. They should not be punished. They should not be discouraged if they ask questions. And non-threatening kind of environment is required. That is the role of a teacher as a facilitator. And clarifying the purposes of the learners. Because it's very, very important that learners will make an effort if they find the classroom experiences significant or meaningful. So we must clarify the purposes of the learner. Then organizing and making available learning resources. The role of the teacher is to guide the learners to find the resources or to arrange the resources and monitor their progress also. Then balancing intellectual and emotional components of learning, because both are equally important. So not neglecting one, rather involving both intellectual and emotional components. Then sharing feelings and thoughts with learners but not dominating. So the teacher tries to share, teacher tries to have an interaction, non-threatening kind of an interaction. Both the learners and teachers interact and they share their feelings and thoughts, but nobody dominates, especially teacher doesn't dominate. Now, according to Rogers, learning is facilitated when the student participates completely in the learning process and also has a control over its nature and direction. It is primarily based upon direct confrontation with practical, social, personal, or research problems. And self-evaluation, as we have already emphasized, it's very important. Rogers also emphasizes the importance of learning to learn and an openness to change. Dear learners, in this session, we have discussed humanistic perspective in learning. First of all, its meaning, then major principles. Then we have discussed the views of two main theorists. First, Abraham Maslow, his views and instructional implications, followed by Carl Rogers' views on learning, as well as the instructional implications. That's all for this session. I hope you must have enjoyed. Thank you very much.